and good evening, and welcome everyone. My name is Jenny Dahu, and I will be moderating today's Field of the Future speaker series, exploring environmental, social, and governance, also referred to as ESG. To share a little bit about me, I am working in the climate change group at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. My role is currently focused on implementing an organization-wide rollout of Paris alignment across all World Bank projects globally, starting July 1st. Prior to joining the international development space, I worked in the banking sector, focusing on treasury management solutions for corporate 100 companies. The Fields of the Future speaker series is hosted by the Aga Khan Education Board, with the aim of exploring career paths, innovation, and opportunities in selected fields of the future. I am very pleased and very excited to introduce you to our speaker for today, Haseena Charania. From working in corporate, nonprofit, and government environments, Haseena has multi-sectoral expertise in international sustainability communications, science, and business. At Quantis, which is a sustainability consulting firm that was recently acquired by Boston Consulting Group, she is the United States ESG reporting lead. She focuses on applying ESG communications and reporting principles to global clients like Danone, Capgemini, and Eli Coffee. Before Quantis, she worked with the United Parcel Service, the United Nations, and even founded her own sustainability education consulting company. She earned Green Biz's prestigious 30 Under 30 award for her work in the field. For her educational background, Haseena majored in chemistry at Emory University and earned her master's in environmental management from Duke University. And now, without further ado, Haseena will speak to us about her career path, and how this field will evolve in the future. Over to you, Haseena.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to see so many different people on this call, calling from everywhere. Very excited also to kick off this series, and happy to see that we're dedicating so much time to this field that, just a heads up, will have a skills gap. There will be a lot more opportunities than talent, especially in the coming years. So something to definitely start to look into for yourself as well. Before I get started, I am going to give you a little bit of kind of background on what ESG is, maybe how that relates to you on a more practical basis. Then we'll go into a little bit more about my background, and then finish off with some tips for how you can do more to support this career. Just a quick disclaimer here, my thoughts are my own, just very quickly, briefly. All right, so I want to start with, what is ESG? What does ESG mean to you? So when we think about the term, right, E stands for environmental, S stands for social, G stands for governance. Environmental metrics, when we're doing an annual ESG report, a lot of companies are doing those every year. Some of those metrics are going to look like a company's impact on climate change. How is it reducing waste? What is its water use? Some of the social metrics are going to look like deaths at a company, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How much diversity of thought is in a company, human rights and labor, and then also volunteer hours. And G is a little bit less, I think, self-explanatory, but the way that I think about it is, how is a company governing itself? Is the answer to that ethically? And what does ethically really mean? Some of those metrics are, how is it avoiding corruption? What types of policies are in place in case something does go awry? And then how and then does leadership in the company itself have the necessary diversity of thought to really pressure test solutions? There's a lot of data to say that diversity of thought does increase the performance of a company and helps to really challenge, you know, a lot of maybe presumptions that we might have when we're launching, let's say, some products. So G is that kind of how is it governing itself? It's a little bit more ambiguous, but that is, you know, just kind of a very systems-wide view at how a company is structured. Now, what is the point, right? So, okay, these companies are doing ESG reports. And this, you know, isn't just for companies. A lot of organizations, nonprofits do this in general. But what is the point? ESG is a framework for how, you know, to capture a company's non-financial performance. It includes risks and opportunities for investors beyond the financial, and it can give a picture of what the company's performance looks like, maybe historically, and then maybe like just for the next 2 or 3 years. But what about beyond that? The point is this. The point is that we are trying to meet our goals and our needs today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So think about that. We're not thinking 2, 5 years down the line. We're thinking 20, 50, 100 years, 200 years down the line. If we want our favorite organizations, companies, hobbies to continue existing and to continue to be enjoyable, what do we need to do today to get there? That is the term that we use in the industry is a systems perspective. Now, if you have that systems perspective, you're not just thinking of it today, right? You're thinking very, very broadly, and you're thinking of how each individual piece of, you know, a business practice or an employee's experience or everything is going into the future of that company. So again, really think about the actions today. Are they supporting the environment? Are they supporting our communities? Are they supporting our economy? What is going to allow us to get to that livable future together? I'm going to spend like a very quick minute on this slide. These are terms that are related to ESG, but they are made for different audiences. So they might be terms for investors, corporations, policymakers, a lot of different folks. So you might see CSR, you might hear of social impact, impact investing, things like that. Now, this is something that I would recommend when you do see these terms. I recommend not falling into the alphabet soup of these terms, especially in a newish career. There will be a lot of discussion of how do we call, you know, what do we call ourselves? What is the work that we're doing? How do we give people a good picture of what we're doing? And I want us to go beyond that. I don't want us just to be focused on the vocabulary. I want us to start doing the work. And so just know these are related terms, but I don't recommend falling into the alphabet soup here. All right, so why do we care about ESG? I really love this quote by Jim Hartsfeld, who is a local sustainability leader here in Atlanta, where I'm based. He says, there are 100 doors into sustainability. If we can imagine a livable, enjoyable future, let's say with good air, good water, a strong economy, strong communities, what do we need to do to get there? Simply put, I would say a lot of work. I think that there is a lot of work we can do. And I think that's what I'm going to focus on, honestly, throughout the entire presentation. There are so many doors you can enter into the field of sustainability based on what you yourself care about. So let's say you care about fashion. There is a door to enter for sustainable fashion there. Let's say you care about engineering. There is a great way to enter the field through a lens of engineering. Let's say you love food. I love food. There is a way to enter sustainability through that door. And believe it or not, these doors can be incredibly incredibly impactful. So really think about like what that means for you. You don't need to go into, okay, ESG analyst, as a career. What do you care about? What do you love? What do you want to see stick around? Those are the things that I would really encourage you to do more research on how those can be more sustainable. And I'll explain too what I mean by sustainable in just a second. But just know that everything that we do today directly ties to how we're building our future together. Okay, so this next slide is actually very visual. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of picture it, imagine it in your mind. So what does ESG look like? Okay, let's say that we are thinking about ESG and how it applies to your favorite hobby. Let's say it's basketball. This, believe it or not, relates very strongly. I'll show you kind of how we in the field can think about it. So first, we're going to look at, okay, what is a basketball made of, right? 90% of all rubber, which is what the basketball is going to be made of, comes from the Amazon rainforest in South America. So if 90% of those rubber trees that produce this rubber come from there, we need to make sure that we are protecting those rubber trees and that they're able to continue to produce that natural rubber for years to come. Okay, let's say we have the materials, right? We've done that. Now what? We need to make sure that it's safe to touch, it's safe to place in our soil, safe to be around our waterways, wherever that basketball may end up, we need to make sure that it is safe. The other thing that we need to make sure, this is more of that S here, is that it's affordable. So let's say you have this really great, safe, effective basketball, but it's like $200 US. Maybe not the most sustainable, right? Let's say you have a good, affordable, safe basketball. We also need to make sure that that governance component is in there. What that governance component, it looks like is, okay, who is creating that basketball? Let's look back at the company. Are they running their company with ethical practices? Are they ensuring accessibility for its users as well? All of that is governance. And just remember here, if you have 2 out of the 3, right? So let's say that it's affordable and the company has great governance, but it's not safe to touch, not sustainable. If it's, safe to touch and great governance, but not affordable, not sustainable there. So just really keep like that entire system has to be in place for it to be considered a sustainable thing that is supporting ESG. Now, let's say that we played indoors. What do we need to play basketball indoors? I would say probably the most important is air conditioning, and that is going to be powered by energy, right? So what energy are we using to cool our spaces? Ideally, if we're, again, trying not to leave a negative impact into the future, we're going to be relying on clean energy that doesn't leave pollutants and things like that for our environment for years into the future. Now, let's say that we are playing outdoors. We will need maybe a few things to play outdoors, not air conditioning, right? But what would we need? We would need good air quality and livable temperatures. Just from kind of an environmental perspective, there are other social and governance aspects here as well. From just an environmental perspective here, we need baseline, good air quality and livable temperatures. And this I've only talked about for one material. I've only talked about it for the basketball. I haven't talked about the hoop, the court, the jerseys, nothing. There is a lot more that we depend on just for this one hobby. So think about your hobbies, and I really encourage you to do some research behind the scenes for what that means for you. So think about your hobbies, right? What goes into the things that you love to buy and use? What are the things that you want to see continue into the future? And how can you, maybe even on a personal level, not professional, but just personal, help to make those things that you love more sustainable? I want to just say, like, reiterate here that sustainability is intersectional. There's a movie that's out that's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And that movie title reminds me of how I think about sustainability. Everything Everywhere All at Once. There is some way into sustainability from whatever you're doing, whatever activities you have going on in your daily life. So before I jump into more about what I do want to describe a little bit more about what my company does, because from the last slide, you kind of saw like what ESG looks like and how we think about it. That's exactly what my company does. I work at Quantis, which is now part of Boston Consulting Group, which is one of the largest strategy consultants in the world. And our goal is to go from business as usual to business at its best. So if we're looking at, our daily practices right now, how are we going to get to, again, that future that we're envisioning? We're an environmental consulting firm. We are trying to incorporate more of that social, that governance, but really the environment has been kind of the expertise, and we're bringing in the other components as well. The diagram on the right, I really love. This is a diagram of our planetary boundaries. And this is kind of how Quantis looks at the work that we do, especially when it relates to corporate sustainability. We focus a lot on the actions of businesses because they have quite a lot of impact, honestly, on all of our like impacts across the environment, across society, things like that. So this diagram, if you look at the middle, it kind of shows like what is happening within the planetary boundaries that is actually sustainable. That's something that we can sustain for the long term, that it's safe for the planet, safe for us. So in that green little boundary is where there's a safe operating price. Now, if you keep going, there is increasing risk all the way to high risk. One thing I want to just plant in your mind as we go through, especially this webinar series, especially as you look through other ESG type content, is that climate change is extremely important as an issue. And yet there are so many other things that go into our planetary boundaries, that go into what the planet can sustain, that we also need to be looking at. Climate change is a very urgent issue, and I think that's why we have focused a lot on it, but we wanna make sure that anything we're doing to support climate change isn't making an adverse impact on some of the other planetary boundaries in the short term. That is, if we're just focusing on that, we call that generally carbon tunnel vision or climate change tunnel vision. So I'll just warn you to kind of keep away from that. Some of the things that are included here are things like novel entities, which that just means like plastics in our environment, things that are going to stick around for a really long time. This has not yet been quantified, but if you think about plastics in our oceans or waterways or soil or food, can we keep just kind of like throwing away, these things are going to last for decades into those spaces that we inhabit? No, right? There are limits within our planet. There are boundaries within our planet for that. So kind of think about like what that looks like for you as well in terms of plastic consumption. There's one here that I feel very encouraged by. So if you look at stratospheric ozone depletion off to the right here, I love that we are now in the below boundaries, that safe operating space for ozone. Believe it or not, a few decades ago, we were not. We were in that high risk area. And Limits to Growth, there's this book that actually talks about how we brought ozone back into the safe operating space. Limits to Growth talks about how, policies, companies, everyone, technology, we all came together to actually bring that very high risk ozone hole and actually like close it up again through a lot of collective action, a lot of things that we did together to basically solve that issue. So just like we have done for the ozone hole, there are I think if we work together, I think that there are a lot of solutions we can implement to do this for a lot of the other planetary boundaries that we have. All right, let me talk a little bit now about what I do in my daily work. So like I said, Quantis's goal is to go from business as usual to business at its best. So if, let's say you like engineering, right? We've done projects where we have helped to create a sustainable perfume for Bulgari. If you really like analysis and Excel, we've done projects like with Armani Beauty, where we're calculating the impact of one of their, perfumes. Or we're, for other companies too, we're actually calculating not just like for the one product within their portfolio, but for the full company, all of their, let's say, clothing, their beauty, all of the different things that they have in their portfolio. What is the full impact, the full footprint of that company, whether that's a plastics footprint, a water footprint, a carbon footprint, whatever that might mean, but what is the entire impact of that company on a year-to-year basis? If you like to be creative, for Del Monte, what we do is we'll take, these annual ESG reports that I talked about before. We'll take those annual ESG reports, and the whole point is to make this like 100, 200 page ESG report a little bit more interesting here. And so we'll dig for information, like let's say a company has reduced 50% of its food waste, right? How? Like, how did you do that? What policies have you implemented? How did the employees take part in this? What maybe new technology has this company implemented to get to this really great reduction in food waste? So we'll take those like little bits of information and we'll create infographics and videos and events for employees to learn more, social media posts, just like fun and engaging content overall. So my daily work really is, it's a large breadth of different things for whatever skills you bring to the table. There is honestly something you can do. So how did I get into this work? I'm going to spend a few minutes here on this slide because I've experienced a variety of environments, done a lot of different types of work. A lot has gone on in the 10 years that I've been in the field. And I've been recognized, like Jenny said, for my leadership in the field through Green Biz's 30 Under 30, which I would, if you're looking at trying to get into the field and you're really looking at how to be a leader, I would really encourage you to look into that program for some of the profiles if you're interested in applying for yourself. It has greatly accelerated my career and really led to some wonderful opportunities. So just to backtrack, I don't know if y'all know this, I started off in pre-med. I was at Emory, I was majoring in chemistry. I was not exactly sure what I wanted to do after undergrad, but I knew that I thought chemistry was fun. And so I majored in it and I knew I could like apply it to a whole bunch of different things. Then the summer before my senior year, I actually studied abroad in Italy and realized that a career in sustainability was actually possible. I like had not seen that before. And again, this was like 10-ish years ago, just didn't even know that that was like a possibility at that point. I came back, I started taking classes, and like the nerd that I am, I gave myself 5 years to test out the career. Whatever opportunities I could get in that time, whatever impact I could make in that time, I wanted to see if this was really viable. And I've been here for 10 years, so clearly it is, but that was at that time a pretty risky career to dive right into. The first half of my career after I graduated from Emory, I focused a lot on like things similar to chemistry. So I did a lot of analytical work, a lot of reporting, a lot of honestly just like work behind Excel, lots of analytics there. then I knew, and I'd known this kind of when I had graduated with my bachelor's, but I knew I didn't have a degree in what I wanted to do in sustainability. And I knew too that a lot of these issues, the planetary boundaries that we have, our action today is way more important than our action like 20, 50 years down the line. The work that we need to do today is going to be a lot more impactful. And so I knew I wanted to accelerate my career and like expand the reach of my work. And so I knew I wanted to basically try to get that additional degree for me to like gain the expertise to know what I'm talking about. And so after a few opportunities in, working with engineers, working with a lot of policymakers, things like that, I started my program at Duke and I focused on corporate sustainability there. So really, I wanted to take, like, yes, I can understand scientific papers and yes, I can understand analyses. But I think personally, if I can't take that and do something with it, I'm limiting my effectiveness. So I focused a lot there on communications. I focused on how to expand my reach. And to me, I think focusing on the corporate side is the way to go for me. And so really, like, since then, I've worked at UPS, I've worked within my own consulting company, and then now with Quantis, focused on that communications, focused on that like translation of the science and of the data to general audiences so we can all start to take part in kind of this action together. I'm going to add a little bit more color to this. So my path had a lot of forks in the road, and I'm happy to talk about this more during the Q&A. I had a lot of forks in the road, and there were a lot of considerations that I had to go into. It was very risky, honestly, along the way. But I think the thing that's helped has been that my mom, supported me no matter what. Like my sister is in sports social media. I'm in corporate sustainability. These are not necessarily the most conventional of careers, but I was very excited to hear that, no matter what I did, no matter what I focused on, I had that level of support coming from my mom to really follow what I think is the most impactful career that makes me happy. So I want to spend a couple of minutes here specifically for this audience. So the people that that are attending and that have registered. International perspectives and intersectionality have been key to my success. My perspectives coming from a low income single parent family and being a minority in most of the spaces that I occupy, that can be seen as a weakness. But I think that especially for this field, that has been one of my greatest strengths. I've lived in all of the countries off to the right, and I won't talk about this too much. I encourage you to research it a little bit more. On the left here is this diversity wheel, which is where all of those identities that I mentioned, low income, single parent, being a minority, being, I was born in India. I was not born in the United States where I was raised. Just being an outsider in those ways, this diversity wheel helps to explain how those differences in perspective, if we bring those together within the individuals that are working in an organization, we can again contribute to that diversity of thought that I mentioned earlier. So again, really would encourage you to look more into the diversity wheel, but this is how I think about a lot of interactions and like what different people bring to the table. And with those, kind of minority backgrounds, you have to also keep in mind that many issues that we face affect the marginalized globally the most, right? So bringing these perspectives that I think a lot of people on this call do bring is so critical for this field, especially this field. One of the biggest weaknesses actually for ESG, I want to say in the US, but I believe this is the case globally as well, is that the field has a lot of privilege. A lot of people with privilege are in this field. And so I think that can limit the types of perspectives that people maybe with low income backgrounds or minority backgrounds in other ways do bring to the table. So again, I mentioned that there is a skills gap, there is an opportunity gap, and I would say especially in this arena, there's a lot of opportunity, and all of the things that I bring to the table have led to great promotions, me being able to negotiate more salary because I do bring additional skills to the table. Again, this has not been a weakness. It has been challenging, but it has not been a weakness. It has actually been a really big strength in my career. All right, so let's get tactical here. If you're interested in greening your career, so the career that you're in currently, how would you do that? Like I mentioned, some of the fastest growing green jobs, some of the fastest growing careers are within the sustainability field. And it doesn't mean, again, that you're going to be like an ESG analyst or an ESG director. It's actually growing ESG and sustainability within the careers that we already have. So that's kind of a shift, especially when we talk about a lot of these careers. You don't have to go and specialize just in that. You just have to bring it to what you're doing now. So let's say you love sports. There are organizations like the Green Sports Alliance where you can learn more. Let's say you love architecture, earn your LEED professional credentials and learn how to do architecture in a more sustainable way. And a quick tip here is that a lot of times schools and workplaces will pay for you to upskill. So you don't have to make this investment immediately. I will share a few additional ways basically to how to enter the career and things like that. But one thing I want to just say quickly is that you need to know your stuff when you're entering this career. There are a lot of legal risks. There are a lot of risks of like greenwashing and things like that if you don't know what you're talking about in this career. So know your stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean going and getting your degree, paying for an additional, master's or things like that immediately. I would say that there are so many different ways you can learn and you can upskill on your own before you make such a large investment. So I'll share some of those in just a second, but again, try to figure out how to do this without immediately going to, investing quite a lot of money and time into like a whole, new degree. So yeah. How do you green your career? I'm going to show you some top 10 solutions for climate change specifically, and how, let's say, like you have a restaurant, right? You can incorporate plant-rich diets, you can reduce food waste, you can work on clean cooking, you can do refrigerant management. You've covered 4 of the top 10 solutions specifically for climate change. You love energy and you maybe love like engineering too. Wind turbines, solar, like alternatives to the energy that we use. We use mostly hydropower as a renewable source in the world. Do that. If you want to invest in girls and education around the world, family planning and education, literally the top 7 solution for climate change. And like I mentioned, there are many other planetary boundaries that we're exceeding. There is a lot of work to be done, and however you want to be doing it, there is a way to do that. Okay, so now let's say you want to enter the field. You want to go and do that like ESG analyst, manager, director type role. Number 1 tip, huge, is volunteer at conferences and attend local sustainability events. These conferences that I go to, like Green Biz, Sustainable Brands, they can be upwards of like $4,000 to enter. But when you volunteer at these conferences, not only are you able to avoid that like large, again, investment, you're working with the speakers behind the scenes to set up their rooms. You're getting so much more interaction with the leaders in the field. Like literally my best tip out here, volunteer at conferences, volunteer at events, just like get out there and start, networking and doing that. But But really, like, again, you don't have to shell out thousands of dollars to do that. Find people that you are interested in learning more about and ask for informational interviews. I would say make sure to do this respectfully because, you know, a lot of us are doing this for many different people. And so use guidelines like the ones from Indeed to do this in a way that's respectful, but ask for those. Ask for 15, 20, 30 minutes and ask them real questions, not what is your background? How have you gotten here? More than what's on their LinkedIn page. Ask them, you know, what has been like the biggest challenges for you? What are some things to consider for someone that's new? Ask them the difficult questions. Join your company or school's green team. Most will have them. And this is a really great way to like get on the ground, figure out how this relates to you specifically, and start to, again, like upskill through doing. There are always like programs and things that you can get involved with. And so like, just, yeah, figure out what those look like for you. Then let's say that like you're in public health, right? And you're looking to start to make those connections to a field that's specifically related to like energy and sustainability, or let's say like environmental health and safety, but you're not necessarily in that type of position now. One tip that a career counselor gave me was make one change at a time until you get to your dream job, until you get to your dream job. Also a green job. But you know, let's say you're doing public health, find a job that's public health and sustainability. I've seen those out there. Then find a job that's closer to, let's say you want to do energy. Start to do a little bit more of that work within your job now, volunteer for different things, or again, try to find that next position that incorporates more of that like energy expertise. Let's say that's where you want to go. So yeah, just make those small changes. It has to make sense for the person that is hiring you. So make those small changes to get to kind of where you want to go. Then take courses, take certificate programs. A lot of different things are already available for free on LinkedIn. Again, invest in this education so you can be a really good contributor to the field. But there is a lot of things that you can already do to learn about the field without getting that, you know, whole degree and spending that time. And then last but not least, earn the degree. I did. I think that that was exactly what I needed to do. I didn't have that background, and I really, I wanted to be more aggressive, and I wanted to really accelerate my career. That made the most sense for me. But when you're looking at those like degree programs, there are different ones for like sustainable fashion, sustainable policy, sustainable like environmental science, environmental law, so many different types of career programs or degree programs. Just see what that really means for you, like what you really want to be doing, and then start to do more research on those. All right, so what are the top skills that are needed in the career specifically? I'm going to focus a little bit on the table to the right first, just as an example. But like I said before, if you're interested in fashion, if you're interested in environmental health and safety, energy, even sustainable landscaping, so many different ways. And look at the growth percentages for all of those. They are very fast growing because there's a lot of demand. When you look at like the skills that are needed for some of these careers, they're going to be things like project management, public speaking, leadership and strategy, data analysis, and communications. I probably do every single one of these on like a weekly basis. Maybe not public speaking as much, but still a very, very good set of skills to start to build up if you don't have those just yet. And there's more. GreenBiz comes out with the State of the Green Business report every year. It talks about the diversity in the field. It talks about like new skills that are important. This is a direct screenshot from some of these reports. Keep up with it. Like what other skills are coming up that are really important? What maybe can you do to help to enhance like what you're bringing to the table? And I have a slide here mainly to challenge maybe some misconceptions of the field. So these are 2022-2023 average annual salaries for sustainability specialist, manager, and director roles. When a lot of times when we think about, okay, I want to do something that's impactful, I want to do something that's good for people and the planet, I think we assume that we're going to be destitute. And I think this slide helps to debunk that. I don't think that that is the case, especially with how much demand there is for the field and especially how much there will be in the future. You don't have to sacrifice a lot to help to make that impact. You just have to find the right jobs. All right, so we're about to wrap up here. Why is ESG a field of the future? Like I mentioned before, there is that skills gap. There will be jobs that require green skills are increasing by 8% annually over the last 5 years, but the same share of talent to fill those positions is only at about 6%. So we need more people. This is something that I feel very, very fulfilled by. And so, yeah, again, what does that look like for you? If you're interested, there will be some jobs out there for sure. All right, and then I'm including, I do a lot of audiobooks. I don't read physical books quite often, but I do read a lot of articles and listen to these books and kind of keep up with the knowledge out there. I will include these in the slides that will be shared after the presentation as some great books to just start to get familiar with the field. So we'll include these here for future reference. All right, so we're going to transition here to Q&A. Very excited to hear what questions you have, and I'll hand it over to Jenny here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Haseena, for this really, really thoughtful and detailed presentation on ESG today. We have a lot of questions that have been coming in, and so we're going to jump right in. Just a couple of comments. The questions are really like combined into two primary components. One is technical questions, and then the other are about how did you get here and really how do you pivot? And so what I'll do is I'll take a couple of the technical questions, but then we'll spend more of the time on how do you pivot, because different people are in different phases of their career, and hearing some thoughts and advice on how you've done it and maybe others who you've worked with and on how they may have done it will probably be helpful for this group. And so if that's okay, the technical questions, I'm actually going to bulk into a couple if you're okay with that. I'm unsure if these questions are about sort of the vocabulary, which you talked about in the beginning, or if this is actually, if each of these components that I'm about to talk about are significantly different. And so if you could maybe talk to that a little bit, because you started your presentation saying that, you know, that that ESG has sort of evolved, even though it's had similar sort of characteristics over the last several years. And so a couple of questions that I'll bulk together is, can you speak to some of the challenges relating to ESG and greenwashing? You talked briefly about greenwashing, so it would be helpful to understand, when you have worked with the private sector and some of your clients, is ESG just another way of greenwashing, or do we feel like this is a bit of a different movement? Related to that, and again, this is related to that in the context of vocabulary, do you think that there is a difference or a significant difference between when you say ESG reporting and sustainability reporting? Or are these kind of synonymous, but it just kind of depends on how a company is labeling their, you know, their annual report, for example, or some of their sort of like corporate social responsibility reporting? I'm going to pause there and ask you to maybe cover a little bit on that.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm so impressed by these questions. This is great. So first, yes, greenwashing. I am in communications. That is what I think about every minute, if not every hour. How do I prevent my clients from putting something out there that can be considered greenwashing? One of the best ways to do that is to ensure that what you're putting out there is based on science and is based on data and is based on research, credible research. I think that let's say that, you are putting out a net zero goal, let's say net zero by 2050. What is going into that goal, right? How much of your operations are being covered by that goal? A lot of times we'll say it's only scope 1 and scope 2, and scope 3 is 97% of your emissions. That doesn't cut it, right? So try to really look closer at the details of what is going into, especially if you're making claims or you're making public facing goals, what goes into that first, and make sure that it is very, very grounded before you do that. And your second question, so yes, they are actually very similar. Something that's interesting that I've just seen from this field is that when it comes to financial reporting within a country, a lot of times there's one framework. That's it, right? For the US, it's the 10K. That's how you are supposed to report, especially if you're a public facing company. But for ESG right now, there isn't. There are a lot of like companies have flooded the market with their different frameworks because there has been this much opportunity to get reporting standardized. And so there are frameworks like GRI, SASB, TCFD, CDP, a lot of things going on. When you see an ESG report, corporate social responsibility report, sustainability report, they're all trying to do the same thing, but maybe what data they're incorporating and how they may be storytelling. Maybe it's just a technical report. Maybe it's only a top line, like storytelling, very picture focused report. It can be a little bit different, but the goal is going to be exactly the same.
Excellent. Haseena, I'm going to ask you a question. There's actually been a couple of questions about frameworks, and you just talked about that. But when you talked about it, you threw out a bunch of acronyms. Would you mind maybe saying those acronyms and spelling them out, so if people are taking notes or if they watch this recording after, they're able to Google and find a little bit more about these frameworks that you're mentioning? And if you have any that you recommend, or that any that you find are inclusive, balanced perhaps across the E, S, and the G, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, thank you. So when it comes to global reporting frameworks, some of the most common ones are GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, SASB, let me do task force. So TCFD is Task Force for Sustainability Related Disclosures. That's like a very investor focused one. CDP actually just stands for CDP. It used to stand for something different, just CDP now. And then SASB, I need to actually look up what this one stands for here. It is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. Okay, I'm glad you reminded me to make sure I know that. Those are kind of the four main ones. A lot of companies a lot of countries now are actually regulating their sustainability reporting. So companies are encouraged to report according to the regulations actually that the countries themselves are coming out for reporting. So I would look into more of the reporting regulations coming from Europe, China, India, the US. There are a lot of ones that are coming out right now. And I would say that those are kind of the gold standard. Once we get to those regulations that really regulate and standardize reporting, those are going to be the best ways to reduce a lot of this alphabet soup, reduce a company having to literally do 4 different reports for sustainability. I would really pay attention to those the regulations, because they're coming at us fast.
Thank you, Haseena. There's been a little bit of chatter around the role of science and the role of science as it is integrated into reporting or into data collection. Can you talk a little about how important is the science behind the assessments and the reporting? And from a career perspective, do you need to be a scientist or a climate scientist in order to add value there, or not?
That is a great question. So I work at a very scientific type organization. I work with a lot of PhDs, a lot of like really big kind of experts in the field that have gone deep into the science. And we have people that are not, do not have those backgrounds. I think that it helps to have people on your team or people that you can rely on that can understand the science and embed it into any work that you do. For example, any claims that I'm putting out for a client, or if we're putting out any different sustainability reports, any new goals, every single thing is going to be backed by data that an accountant can go into and confirm. I will not be putting out anything that just sounds fluffy and is not based in stuff. So yes, I think it helps to have those skills, but I'm on the communications team. I work with 3 people that are that have like great backgrounds in communications, in writing, in stakeholder engagement, how to communicate to different audiences, great at public speaking. Like I think that I would say like a balance of those 5 skills that I mentioned before. If you're really great at project management, I have a project manager that I work with on a daily basis for different clients. Really, like whatever you bring to the table, I have seen be very effective in like those science and then those like communications, generally buckets.
And can I push you a little bit? Your degrees are in environmental management and chemistry. And so, I mean, you have been educated with a baseline of this, even though you may not be sitting in the lab, 12 hours a day. Do you feel like that has helped you to be a more effective communication or communicator in bridging the science? Or do you say, you know what, I could have learned it, and educating myself along with the things I have would have been sufficient?
Yeah, I think for and please let me know if I'm answering the question correctly. So if I look back at where I've gotten most of my communications and reporting experience, which is what I do on a daily basis, it was on the job. But I know that for me to have like the background in sustainability, the knowledge to be able to get those jobs, I needed to do my research, whether that was from the degrees that I have, or whether that was from a certificate program or a course, or like just picking it up and doing some like volunteer projects, whatever it might be. I needed to make sure in my interviews that I knew my stuff, because again, the companies are taking some risks if you don't know the science behind it. So yeah, I think yes, it's very important to like study some of this. I didn't ever take any like communications courses or anything like that in while I was at Duke, but I know that like I needed to know sustainability, the science of sustainability, to even land a career where I could actually like practice those communication and reporting skills.
That's super helpful. Thank you. We've also had, it seems like there are people that have joined today's session who have a background in finance. They might be auditors, accountants, CPAs. They're working in impact investing, and they're asking, and so it's a little technical because it may be linked to elements of the framework, but I'm going to pivot a little bit now into how do you pivot? And it seems like there are people, like I said in the session, that are coming from that background and that are asking, if I have this background, how do I pivot? And if I have these skills as a baseline, is there a competitive opportunity, or is there a point of entry that you would recommend as they look at different jobs?
So for someone with like an accounting background specifically, or any background?
I've heard a few. So if we can focus on finance, because we've gotten a good number of questions with somebody who may have an accounting background or an impact investing background, which I know are distinct, but they're in sort of that financial, field.
Oh my God, we need you so much. Like we need people with that accounting background so much, because like I mentioned, the regulations that are coming down the pike. A lot of what is happening is that companies are trying to connect the financial reporting, let's say the 10K, to the non-financial reporting, and those systems have to talk to each other, which means we're incorporating ourselves into the existing accounting systems. So like we need you so much. That I've seen jobs specifically for sustainability accounting, specifically looking at people with those skills, because as we try to formalize the industry more and really make it more credible from a financial perspective, we need the people that are doing the accounting and have that background to make those connections and make it make sense for everyone. So yeah, need that very specifically. And I would say like, yeah, sustainability accounting, ESG accounting jobs. I got a message about being recruited for one recently. Lots of them out there.
Haseena, are there things that somebody could write in their cover letter? Like let's stick to the finance and your response right now. Because the good news is, yes, there's demand. I think that the next question that we would love your advice on is, how do I do that? Like, how do I go from how do I get that interview? Are there things that somebody could write in their cover letter or bullets that they could write in their CV that would make them candidates to be interviewed?
That's a really great question. And that's actually something that I learned the hard way. So I know that as soon as I started to format my cover letter and my resume to how business students format their cover letter and their resume, because again, I was applying to businesses in corporate sustainability roles, that's when it got picked up so much more. There is a format for how to do that. I would recommend, like, Georgia State is the one that I use. They have a really great business school. Bulleted format, look at, how best to write in like a succinct way. There is, I'll find it. Axios has a way of writing. It's called brief. Sorry, this is important. So I'm gonna, smart brevity. That's something that I incorporate quite a lot. I've been trained in it as well. I would incorporate smart brevity in your resume, your cover letter, tailor every single one to the job, because no person is reading it first. It's going to be a system that's scanning against the job description and your application to see, like, are there any matches in the first place? Is there any overlap? And then when someone reads it, 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, can you see, okay, yes, this person has the background, the skills to do this job well? Are those things sticking out very quickly? Again, using those smart brevity principles. The easier you can make it for someone to see that you're qualified, the better I think it would be for you.
Excellent, thank you. And thanks for mentioning some of those very specific resources. I think that'll be very helpful. Couple of questions have also come in around, it seems like there are questions that are coming in around pivoting within the E, the S, and the G. And so there are certain people who are working in the environmental policy space, for example, or in the science space, and they're wondering how do you pivot into that corporate space? And are there any opportunities that you see there? And I think related to that, Haseena, can you talk a little bit about, do people look at ESG specialists as somebody who is more E, more S, or more G? Or is there sort of a comprehensive lens? I know your company may be a little more on the E side, But when you describe everything, it seems like they are also touching the S and the G. So can you talk a little bit about that and maybe the wave of the future in that space?
I think you're like hitting the nail on the head. That is the wave of the future. Being able to accurately encompass the E, the S, and the G in decision making, I think will only strengthen the solutions that we're putting out there. I think that if you don't consider, let's say, women or poverty or politics, like corruption policies or things like that in an environmental solution or in something that's like very heavily focused on the E, you're running a risk there. And so I think that is not done as well as I think it will be done in the future, just incorporating all of those components well. But I think that's like strongly needed, and again, one of the weaknesses in the field. One of the tools that I'll mention here is looking at the UN's definition of sustainable development. They include people, planet, and profit. Profit is included in sustainably creating our futures. So like, look at what those look like. Really, like, you can focus on the E and do really well. You can focus on the S and do really well. That's a harder question for me to answer. Like, how do you move from the E to the S to the G? Because I ideally would like us to be doing all of them in different capacities, but be doing all of them. And like, I'm seeing kind of a similar question here. If you're like, let's say, focused on social policy, right? You can try to enter more of that like ESG space by continuing to do policy, but maybe doing like sustainable development policy instead of like social development policy. So I think you can like try to broaden your perspective and try to think about it from that systems view. But yeah, it's going to be like, ideally, we're doing all of those really well.
Excellent. So a personal question for you, because there are so many people who are talking about how do you pivot within ESG, outside of ESG. It seems like when you shared your career, you've done a fair amount of pivoting. But can you talk to us about maybe the most memorable, perhaps the most risky, or maybe most rewarding, I don't know, as you see fit, but pivotal moment in your career that you can share with us?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I can definitely, I've had several pivotal moments where I needed to figure out which path or which job to take. But the biggest one was actually when I was choosing to study abroad in my undergrad that I mentioned. I went to Italy. I was doing a chemistry study abroad program there. We studied like art and cheese and all of those things, but again, like a very like chemistry focused lens. I also had an offer at that point from Baylor for this like pre-med, like very like health sciences focused program. And it was from a really great institution. And at the moment, I remember talking to the Baylor person being like, can I just do both? Like, can we just like figure out the dates and I would love to do this, like, medical research with you. And she was like, no, you definitely are going to have to pick. The dates are definitely not going to work all together in this one summer. And I remember thinking that, especially at the time, I think this is the case today too, there will be a lot of people that are filling that medical space that, a lot of people going into the health field. Overall, there weren't that many people doing that sustainability field. And so if I really wanted to have a lasting legacy, leave an impact, leave the world in a better place than I found it, I knew that like sustainability needed more support. And so in that summer, like 18, 19-year-old me was like, okay, I'm going to do the right thing. This is the right thing for me, and choose the study abroad program. And yeah, would not look back at that decision at all.
Okay, thank you. And related to that question, and I think that you may have touched on it, but if there is a moment in time where you can say, this is what did it, how did you get your foot in the door? Because it seems like that's another related question that people are they're asking, right? Is like, I feel like I could do this, but I just don't know how to get in.
Um, I would say I think networking was one of the biggest things for me. So a lot of the reason why, and I think this has been a little bit of a challenge throughout my career. When I was working at New York City Parks, it was a 10-month fellowship. When I was working at the UN, that was a 3-month internship. There were a lot of kind of like enclosed, like, time encapsulated programs, just could not necessarily extend them. And so that in itself made it so it made me look like I was a flight risk, honestly. Like, it made me look like I couldn't stick to a job and that I didn't have what it takes to be like loyal to a company and things like that. And I think um, that was very challenging. What helped, and this is when I started my own consulting company, and then when I started working at UPS, I had 5 people vouching for me when I applied to that UPS position. I knew them from a public speaking seminar, from conferences that I'd gone to, from grad school. All of these people from within the UPS network were like, I met her at this different thing, and I can vouch for her so strongly. Um, all of that networking that I had built up when I was not necessarily looking for a job, when I was just learning about my career, I kept up those relationships and made a strong impression on those people that they were so eager to vouch for me when the time did come. There have definitely been times throughout this, career path, like the last 10, 12 years, where like I was unemployed and it was extremely hard. And the people around me like held me up during that time. But when I was unemployed, I was probably doing more hours, networking, applying to jobs, doing so much more work than I probably would have in a job. So yeah, I would say put in the investment early and just keep doing the work. It does pay off.
Great. And you have talked a lot about, and you just did that, you seems to me like you've constantly kept learning and you continue to build your knowledge, you continue to do research, you go to these conferences, you're networking, you're doing a lot of things. As you think about the future, what would you recommend, or what do you foresee as the sort of top 3 ESG milestones or developments to watch out for in the next 12 to 18 months?
Okay, so kind of global developments.
Yeah, it seems like there are some questions around, ESG is so many different things. Are there any, are there any things that we should keep in mind or that we could potentially focus on to be competitive in the next year or so?
For sure. Yeah, that is 100%, I would say. So I'm going to say if you can focus on the regulations that are coming out, these are going to help ESG reporting specifically go from like a voluntary type of system to involuntary. That is going to make you indispensable. If you can understand all of the policies behind the regulations that are coming, indispensable, huge. And they're all coming fast, like within the next 2 years, I think they're already going to be in place, like everywhere. So that's going to be really big. Let me think if there are any other. I think some of the milestones that I'm seeing, especially because I think the economy isn't doing so great, is that no matter what, companies are still expected, even if the economy is not doing great, companies are now expected to still continue doing that work on sustainability. And so for you, maybe an opportunity there is to focus on, let's say you bring that accounting background, right? Focus on how you can land that job that is now going to go from involuntary to voluntary. Yes, knowing the regulations is really important, but if you bring accounting to the table, like you can't just like do an annual, financial report when the economy is doing great and skip it if it's not doing great. It's still going to be required, right? So even though there is like kind of a trend like this with the economy, I have seen for reporting, for communications, all of that, it's going up, and it's I think a little bit of a recession-proof career there as well, given the economic circumstances. So I think I'm going to pick two, and I'm going to say regulations and I'm going to say accounting. If you can learn up on all of those standards and the things that are coming, I think you can make yourself really indispensable right now.
Great. Haseena, you mentioned regulation several times and policy. What in your mind, and I know your answer was global, but in your mind, if somebody is like, okay, I'm sitting in India and I'm going to try to understand regulation, does that mean that somebody should go and policy, right? Does that mean that somebody should now do research in the regulatory requirements of that particular country? So that's a government point of entry. Or should somebody say, okay, I'm interested in the transport sector, and so I'm going to look at, the top 5 transport companies and, understand their vision statement and look at their sustainability report. Like, how do you do the homework? What's the optimal way to do the homework to understand the policies and regulations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'm going to answer that in 2 different ways. I'm looking right now, I just did like a quick search on sustainability regulations for the US. If you just do that for the country that you're based in, a lot of countries are starting to put together regulations when it comes to how new transportation is being built, how new buildings are being built, how companies are reporting against a lot of these things. All of that is already starting to be built. If your company doesn't have it, the 2 I would focus on right now are CSRD, which is coming from the EU. So CSRD stands for the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, coming from the EU. It's already in place. That is something that if there are operations for a company in the EU, they're going to be required to report against these. And it's starting to become kind of the gold standard for reporting. I would really, really look into that one. And I don't think it necessarily means that you need to have like a policy job or a policy background to understand them. I think there are courses already, honestly, on how to teach, how to learn CSRD. Just learn it. Just take the time to like learn it on your own. What you're going to be doing with that is then applying it to, let's say you are in a transportation company. You're going to be then applying it to whatever that company is in. If you're looking for a way to be impactful, right? I shared so many different careers, so many different things that you could do, and how you can, like, from what you love, like make this applicable to you. Look at the top 10 like solutions for climate change. Like I mentioned before, that's from Project Drawdown. It'll be in the slides that are sent. Look at your country's top 10 maybe environmental issues or contributors to climate change, contributors to plastic pollution. If you look at like those sectors, a lot of times you'll see building management is really big in that. You'll see that energy is really huge. Transportation is huge. Food is huge. All of those sectors are going to be like really high impact sectors for the kind of work that we're doing. So take a look at, CSRD, take a look at the regulations that are going to be for like all sectors in total. And then if you really want to be like impactful, look at the ones that are going to be the most impactful for your region or your country. And you're going to be able to honestly find more opportunities in those as well.
Excellent, super helpful. We only have a few more minutes, and so we'll ask 1 or 2 more questions before we close the session. This one is related to artificial intelligence. And there's a few questions around whether you have observed anything around the role of artificial intelligence or AI and the revolution and how it may influence this space. And is anyone talking about it? And if so, what are they talking about?
Definitely. So AI, I think, can be one of the biggest contributors. Let me add that to the list that you asked me before. Like some of the things that are going to be game changers for this field in the next few years, AI, I would add that as one of them. Some of the things that I've seen, like when you're looking at like mapping, a region, and you're looking at doing that with some of the current technology that we have, a lot of that still has to be done manually. Like, okay, I want to see, is this land being deforested? You have to do that really manually right now. With AI, that is going to be such a rapid process. I think that there is a lot more that can come specifically for this field that helps to automate a lot of like the work that we do that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of like resources. And I think instead of us, like maybe even at one point, ESG reporting will be able to be done through AI, who knows? I think it can take a lot of the work that we're putting into like kind of the manual labor of the work and do it more to like actually taking action. So I think AI is going to be, AI is already, but is going to be, I think, like a really big solution for us to just do more of that impactful work.
Great, thank you. And then just one final question that in some cases, some people may feel like is potentially a barrier. But do you think that, do you think that ESG is going to be impacted by by different countries, how they perceive environmental science, climate change, and government, and the role that a particular government plays in that particular moment in time?
That's a great point. And I do hear kind of the anxiety in that question too, because I think that there is a lot that the systems around you are going to either help or not help in doing this work. I think that, I mean, like I faced that very much after I graduated, when our administration in the US was not supportive of sustainability. It was very hard for me to get a job. I think though that one, there are a lot more remote jobs, right? Look beyond where you're based. The work needs to get done. There are going to be opportunities. Look beyond where you're based. And I'm thankfully like not worried about that anymore, because I think a lot of what we saw in terms of like climate change denial or things like that, I think a lot of people have realized that these issues are real, these issues need to be addressed, and that we just need to figure out maybe how to do it, not that we need to avoid it entirely. There are always going to be political challenges to honestly like new work, no matter what it is. But I think that if we can go beyond politics at some point for some of this, especially when you're just entering the field, just look for the opportunities where they are, because thankfully they're there now. They're readily available, and I think that we, like, if I can like leave you with a quick point of advice, there's a lot of ways to not be like in this like doom and gloom of climate change and doom and gloom of like environmental action and sustainability overall. Feed yourself, feed your soul a little bit with like the climate optimism that's out there. There are a lot of like social media profiles, videos, lots of things that can like help you feel encouraged and see the opportunities where they are now, and kind of focus on that. Just do the work. It's out there. If it's like not necessarily supported by the place that you are, it's okay. Look elsewhere because it's going to be there.
Thanks, Haseena. That was actually my final question was what's your final tip of advice? And I think that's perfect. I think if you've shared anything today, it's that we're not talking about companies and organizations and nonprofits in the world just doing this to do it. I think that what we're learning is that this is really something that is embedded in the fabric of our future generations, and our hope is that there are so many, and it's clear that there are so many points of entry to do good work and to add value in this space. And you've really showed us a lot of that and gave us a lot to think about today. Haseena, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a good afternoon, have a good evening, and take care. Bye-bye.